I am here with a video essay. This is actually a part of my theater history project given to me from a hat. This is probably gonna be really weird for me to watch with other people watching in the same room as me, but yeah, vaudeville. Let's talk about it. Do you know about it? I didn't know about it until now, and that's what we're here to talk about. My introduction to vaudeville, to an extent, was actually through the iconic PBS docuseries of Broadway, the American musical that was hosted by Julie Andrews. Vaudeville definitely was only briefly mentioned in the first episode of this series. It gives you the hint that vaudeville was a part of forming the American musical that we know today. The other exposure was actually when my mother introduced me to the musical Chicago. I really wasn't into it at first. I was branching out from my fandom of Phantom of the Opera and Wicked, and I was kind of going through a Sweeney Todd phase thanks to my grandmother showing it. Thank you, Ayla. Love you, miss you. You know, I listened to it. The fact that Lumiere was on the original Broadway cast recording was pretty neat. And the 2002 movie, fucking bomb. So I only know really a small portion of it. Why was it a thing? Why was it so popular in America? How did it have its influence on the Broadway musical? Does it still have its influence on the Broadway industry today? Stick around and find out. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, vaudeville is a form of stage entertainment consisting of various acts such as performing animals, comedians, or singers. Very precise, Merriam-Webster. Thank you very much. That was actually popular in the 1860s through the 1930s. Basically, when it came to be a thing in America, when it turned into not being a thing in America, kind of varies. It's a little wishy-washy. The origin of the term is even a little bit wishy-washy. Some people think it comes from the phrase vaudeville, which means song of the valley of the Vere, or voix de vie, the voice of the city, respectively. There's also a story where Tony Pastor, who is known as the father of vaudeville, he was a entrepreneur, he was a performer, but then he turned into an entrepreneur, and that's why he's known as the father of vaudeville, because he made a lot of money off of it. He referred to vaudeville as the successor to variety. My 2 cents, I think vaudeville is just a super fancier way of saying variety show. It's literally a marketing tool. That's basically it. Just my 2 cents. So it originally began in France during the July Monarchy, which was around the 1840s, but it was a little different compared to the American version that we are more familiar with. Jennifer Tierney wrote in her article, "A genre for early mass culture, French vaudeville and the city." Look at me citing sources. She states, "French vaudeville is better compared to the 20th century television situation comedy, for which it should also be recognized as the model. Like situation comedies, vaudevilles were formulaic and mass-produced, and, like their 20th century analogs, their popularity depended, at least in part, on their formulaic predictability. Although vaudevilles were not based on a fixed cast of characters, as situation comedies are now, each play was infused with the same kinds of ingredients: stereotypes, situation-based plots, reversals of fortune, mistaken identities, and, of course, happy endings." So again, you might be thinking, isn't that basically a talent show? And the answer is yes, but it's like more elegant, more European, which is like the thing back in the day. So this thriving new entertainment kind of got introduced to America when French performers came over to do their shindigs and whatnot. Entertainment was being offered in saloons and music halls. The clientele was mainly men. The variety shows were a bit on the crude side, and the main source of income of all of these sources of entertainment was from alcohol sales. Yes, movies were around, but it was in still such a very early development that it wasn't really a go-to source for entertainment for the mass population at the time. So, theater! Or bust. However, surprise, surprise, there were new state laws that came into place that removed alcohol from theater venues. A lot of people were thinking, oh my god, I can't make money in the theater anymore, but then people were like, actually, wait a minute, I think this might be an opportunity to try something new. In David Monet's book, Vaudeville and the Making of Modern Entertainment, he observes that a few entrepreneurs then seized on this as an opportunity to uplift variety entertainment by inviting women and children into their theaters. The process was fitful, hinging on lawful enforcement, location, and the individual manager's perception of his market, but by renovating, raising prices, eliminating explicit material, and closing their bars, vaudeville, as the respectable form of variety entertainment became known, gradually emerged. So basically, the biggest test was, let's see if we can actually sell money off of the entertainment itself. If we can get a female audience in, amazing. That means we can really make this a thing. I don't know why they focus on women. I don't know if it's because, like, oh, men won't be interested in coming to the theater anymore because no alcohol would be served. Blech, I don't know. It's really weird. So they need to test out this potential new financial opportunity without the risk. So what do? You find a loophole. The duo of John Coster and Albert Bial, B-I-A-L, are a great example of this. They originally had a music hall in 1879 and discovered that they could actually still sell alcohol as long as it was within a concert form, so no speech, which means that they would offer music, dancing, acrobatics, and with their previous experience of running a restaurant, they kind of had a unique and special experience for their customers. David Monad comments, spectators to the first music hall listened to the music while sitting around small tables as wine, beer, and food were served. It was all terribly cosmopolitan. A little German, a little French, a little Russian, was how one patron described it, and a symbol of New York's urbanity. Urbanity? Visitors to New York were sometimes scandalized to find that women attended the music hall despite the booze in large numbers. At Coster and Bial's, you see as many women as men enjoying a foaming cup. Again, I'm not referring to common women, but women of respectable position, wrote a bemused visitor. What? So the fact that they were able to get women, apparently the right women they needed to go through with this maniacal plan, meant that they can rely on audience retention instead of alcohol sales. So that is a pretty big game changer when it comes to livelihood of live entertainment. There was another entrepreneur named Rudolph Aronson, and he actually wanted to see if he could still get away with adding like skits into their vaudeville performances, but also still sell booze. And he actually found another loophole, which the law states that in New York, you can't sell alcohol within the building, but you can still sell it outside. So that led to rooftop gardens being a very big thing and very much an attraction site for tourists and very much a new avant-garde, nouveau riche European thing for New Yorkers to enjoy. This was created atop of his current theater, the Casino, and served food and drink while the audience enjoyed a live performance. This was such a huge hit that other theater owners, including Coster and Bial, created rooftop theaters of their own. Oscar Hammerstein I also created one on top of his theater, the Olympia, and yes, I am talking about Oscar Hammerstein I, the grandfather to Oscar Hammerstein II. Please do not get those two confused. You're very welcome. Sorry, that sounded really rude. Probably the most memorable rooftop garden is the one that was created on the top of Madison Square Garden. It was basically an amphitheater that could hold over 1,500 patrons in this freaking rooftop garden place, which was designed by Stanford White. Yes, that Stanford White of Evelyn Nesbit, the crime of the century girl on the velvet swing, wee! Which, by the way, I don't really know if it was an E.L. Doctorow thing or if it was an Aaron Similarity thing, but the way that Evelyn Nesbit is portrayed in Ragtime is kind of laughable. And when I mean laughable, I mean sad. She went through some tough stuff when she was a child. She met Stanford White and Harry K. Thaw when she was a bebe. Also, her career in vaudeville was more so of a source of income. It was a job for her. It wasn't like, Evelyn Nesbit is going on tour. This was a line of work. And when she was touring on vaudeville, she actually was dancing with a guy named Jack Clifford. It didn't really seem all that extravagant. I mean, I found a picture. That's what she was doing. Does it look glamorous to you? Velvet Girl on the Swing, wee! I am thinking of doing a video on her because she does have a musical theater background with her experience in the Floridora. Kaz Rowe is another YouTuber on here that has a fabulous video essay on her. It just gets very dark very quickly, as a warning. So basically, vaudeville just turned into the hottest commodity in New York City. There was always some sort of venue in Manhattan or Brooklyn that people can go to go and see a show. It didn't take very long for other cities to follow pursuit as well, especially with the expansion of public transportation. People in small towns can travel to the closest city hub and see a top-notch performance. And since the shows have been promoted to be on the family-friendly side with a little bit of a wink-wink, women was like the prime audience patron, which I kind of think is like still true to this day. I don't know. That's another tangent that I don't think I have the time to go into. So regardless if women were taking their kids out for a family day or going out with the girls or even having a date with their sweetheart, it was a go-to thing, especially for the middle class. Like this wasn't like a leisurely thing someone would do every 6 months. This was like a once a week thing. Okay, this is like such a major tangent. I'm so sorry, but this is actually what my grandparents did. My grandmother was first pregnant with her first kid and my grandfather like freaked the flush fluff out thinking they were no longer gonna have a social life, so they went to the theater every week. So you know how I said that other little cities would follow pursuit of this? Well, that's how the Vaudeville Syndicate kind of came to be. And what was very interesting is that they had two booking systems, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. And these offices were to try to curate a perfect lineup of entertainment for a vaudeville production to go on the road. It's pretty dense, and surprisingly, there's really not that much information about it, which I feel like is really silly because this definitely is like proof of how national tours have become. But I found this article called The Informational Economy of Vaudeville and the Business of American Entertainment because yes, at the end of the day, theater is very much a business. This was a freaking machine. The Western Vaudeville Managers Association, along with the United Booking Office, its East Coast counterpart, organized such performances at an enormous scale, ushering tens of thousands of vaudevillians between hundreds of stages to a daily audience of millions, creating and distributing bills with machine-like precision. It was the largest entertainment system the world had ever seen, held together by railroad and telegraph and ordered by form and filing cabinet. Yes, there were other booking systems for like concerts and legitimate theater, but for vaudeville, it was like its whole other thing. This is kind of like a hint of what these offices are trying to do when putting on a vaudeville show during the time. Once a booking representative and an artist's agent agreed on the terms of date and price, the representative made out a booking slip stating the terms of the deal. This slip was then taken to a time clock and stamped, locking in the details and preventing any other manager from attempting to steal the slot or double book the performer. Once on the books, the agreement was filed away and a clerical manager with power of attorney for the theater drew up the contracts. After being signed by the artist, these contracts, designed by the agency and standard across their bookings, were printed in triplicate. One went to the theater, one went to the artist, and one remained on hand to serve as a record. So this was a very tight-knit circle. I was gonna say community, but I don't think that's the right word for it. So ironically enough, if you're a performer in this business, you need an agent. Wow, doesn't that sound super familiar to today? No? I'll keep going. And if you tried to go about other ways to be on the syndicate without going through the system, you would immediately be blacklisted. So you kind of had to go with their game or not. When it came to like the business side of vaudeville, they always had to guarantee like an amazing night of entertainment. So when the business became bigger, the more specific and niche driven these artists needed to be able to get more work and be more recognized and noticeable. And that's how you kind of make your mark and get top billing. And also agents need to really understand how to perfect promoting their client to these managers so that they could get work. This actually led to the offices going under investigation with the Federal Trade Commission about their potentially monopolistic restraint of trade, which is like, you know, bad for them, but good for us because now we have all of this information of how this juggernaut of a system worked. Vaudeville made many, many stars, and since this was accessible to the middle class at the time, this actually began the beginnings of fan culture. Before this time, you wouldn't really see, you know, the big crowds and whatnot, and I want a selfie and everything. It's 1910. But at this time, like if you saw W.C. Fields or Fanny Bryce, people are going to be staying at stage door to get a glimpse of them, or even better, maybe even get their autograph. And if they ever see their favorite performer in an ad for a product, they would immediately buy it. Vaudeville became a huge marketing tool in both star vehicles, products, anything you can think of. It's pretty wild. What I wrote in my paper is that it kind of felt like life was influencing vaudeville and vaudeville was influencing life. It makes sense in my brain. I don't know if it's going to make sense to you, but it does to me. So at this point, I can easily just go into why I'm going into all about this and how it pertains to musical theater. But I would be doing something incredibly wrong if I do not talk about Black vaudeville, which is probably the biggest impact that theater history had at the time, in my opinion, especially when it comes to musical theater history. And if it wasn't for Black vaudeville, we wouldn't have the king of vaudeville himself, Burt Williams. First off, Black vaudeville needs a research video essay of its own. Burt Williams himself is someone that I've been wanting to make a video essay on for years. Again, this is just like a trickle of the tip of the iceberg of this whole subject. With the innovations of technology, I kind of believe that vaudeville is actually one of the first visual evidence of racial biases and stereotypes that were portrayed on stage. White actors would adjust their facial features, and they would do this to personify people of different race. This also would include immigrants, Jews, Irish, Italians. Basically, if you weren't American, you were not safe, and you were gonna be the bottom of every joke in every skit. But in terms of like making theater as, oh my God, Morgan is getting into my brain, what George C. Wolfe says as a gumbo, it wasn't even close to that, not even close. When it came to people of color who wanted to perform in the vaudeville circuits, they kind of had to adhere by the rules that were already laid out by previous white performers. Basically, if you are a person of color, you have to portray the person of color in the way that a white actor would do it, which I think is really fucking stupid, but I guess white people were super stupid at the time. America makes me tired, y'all. So by the 1900s, Burt Williams and his comedy partner, George Walker, they were very popular within the Black vaudeville sphere, and they wanted to break barriers and perform for white audiences. And of course, as I just said, they had to adhere to the certain rules, but instead of seeing this as a hindrance, they kind of took this as a challenge to make the mark in redefining blackness on the stage. In introducing Burt Williams, Burnt Cork Broadway, and the Stories of America's First Black Star, Camille Forbes wrote, Burt and George's choice to dub themselves two real coons may have actually aided them in their resistance of racial stereotyping. They attempted to claim the despised term using it consciously. Rather than accept its assumption of inferiority, they took it on so as to assert their realness in contrast to the counterfeit of white blackface performance. In that struggle, they gained some territory for the natural black performer. Furthermore, they called into question the possible realness of blackface performers who only emphasized their artificiality by resource to burnt cork. After all, Williams did not really need the burnt cork to be black. The more I learn about theater being built on racism, my brain hurts. My brain just hurts. And that's all I can say. They became very much an overnight sensation. Unfortunately, George Walker passed away in 1911, so he wasn't really able to enjoy the success as much as Burt Williams did. But when Burt Williams went solo after his passing, he became a star overnight. He's known to be the king of vaudeville for a reason. He was the performer to see. If you're interested in actually learning more about George Walker's wife, Aida Overton Walker, I actually made a YouTube video about her a few years back. I really should make an updated version of that. But she is a bomb, and she's known as being the first Black woman choreographer in musical theater history. She's cool. Go and check it out. But of course, being in America, he wasn't treated like the king of vaudeville. For example, when he was working in the Ziegfeld Follies, there was a point where the actors wanted to unionize, which was basically like the beginning brewings of what is now the Actors Equity Association. He wasn't informed about this, so he showed up to work only to show up to an empty, dark theater. Another time was when he tried to get a drink at a bar. The bartender said that'll be $1,000. Williams just looks at him, puts down $4,000 in cash on the bar and says, I'll have 4. He's such a beast! And his influence on vaudeville was obviously a huge mark in the musical theater canon. One of his most notable songs that he would sing in his acts is a song called Nobody. It immensely, deeply inspired the song Mr. Cellophane that Amos Hart sings in Chicago. Burt Williams' contribution to Black artists in theater history alone is honestly how musicals like Shuffle Along, even productions like The Wiz could turn into a thing. If you want to learn more about Burt Williams, leave a comment below. I would love to share more information about him. That might take me a while, especially with my lack of self-confidence with these. But it's where I'm getting there. So you could probably see by now that when it came to the business side of vaudeville, it's very obvious how it influenced the musical theater industry as a whole. Specifically when it came to touring, there are a lot of big hubs like in San Francisco, Milwaukee, Chicago, Atlanta, Boston. They usually have certain theaters that would play a season of national tours. And you can also see like how they decide to choose which areas to do it. It's more intricate than that because they need to think about, well, when was the last time that we did 6 in Milwaukee? Oh, that was 2 years ago. Maybe we can do that. But we just did Lion King there 6 months ago, so we can't really go to Milwaukee. Maybe we can go to Madison. It's a big puzzle to have all these national tours go to various places. It's just a lot of work. My brain hurts. But to show how it made a big effect in New York City, we need to talk about basically the other huge turning point in musical theater history, which is the Ziegfeld Follies. Now I have to talk about the Ziegfeld Follies for a hot second so you can understand what I'm talking about. There's this dude named Florence Ziegfeld Jr. and he wanted to be famous. And he was dating this woman from France named Anna Head at the time, and she was known prominently for performing in the Folies Bergère in Paris. And in around 1907, their relationship was on the rocks. They were in a common law marriage. She was still technically married to her husband in France, And he was just raging and gambling and philandering with other women. And so she's like, hey, maybe you should put all of your rage in a new project. Maybe you can make something that's like the Folie Bergère, but American. And Florence was like, all right, but if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. In the book of Ziegfeld and His Follies, a biography of Broadway's greatest producer, Sarah and Cynthia Brightson writes, since it would bear his stamp, it would have to carry his trademark mixture of the traditional and the original. And of course, there would have to be a surplus of glamour and spectacle, a touch of the risque, and carefully selected comedic bets. Bits. I meant bits. If the show was to be truly American, Ziegfeld decided that its title could not have a French flavor. It had to be American, and it had to be lucky. And so they said, what about the Follies of 1907? And he was like, all right, sure. But very quickly after that, it turned into the Ziegfeld Follies, and thus it was born. It was a amazing combination of vaudeville performers and beautiful women posed in spectacle like tableaus, insane costumes, insane headpieces, insane backstage scenery. Richard Wagner could never. Absolutely wild. And then you would see people like Burt Williams, Eddie Cantor, Fanny Bryce doing their thing in between these immaculate tableaus of beauty. It's wild. It's brilliant. And it was one of the biggest stepping stones for musical theater history. And that's why I say that vaudeville made its influence on musical theater history. If it wasn't for that link, then they really wouldn't have like a connection, I guess. What's also really interesting at this time is that people, especially the middle class, were kind of raising eyebrows being like, hey, this kind of feels like it's turning into a capitalist thing, and that makes me concerned. Which I just find so interesting, because you hear that European theater is so well funded by their governments that I'm like, why isn't it like that in America? And I think I figured it out. This guy named Elbert Hubbard made this pamphlet called Orpheum Vaudeville, as I have found it, basically kind of chilling out the working class, being like, don't worry, we got you. Like, this isn't like a capitalist adventure. This is a leisurely activity for you to enjoy, for you, the people, the working class, the middle class, to enjoy on a regular basis. I found this article that basically commented on it, called Crafty Capitalism, Elbert Hubbard and the Selling of American Vaudeville. By promising Americans a return to the fulfilling self-driven artisanship of the past, the arts and crafts movement, which by the way is a whole other gloomy-glom of more information that I cannot get into because my brain will erupt, provided a solution for middle-class Americans in the figure of the agentic craftsman. Hubbard's construction of Americans as active, busy, and useful laborers exploits the agency associated with the craftsman to shore up confidence in the principles of turning the page, reliance and hard work. Presented as the intellect and sinew of the community, the average American becomes invested with the skill and responsibility of producing work that matters. The rhetorical significance of this emphasis on the American as laborer is that it permits Hubbard to present a vision of the Orpheum as a universal space for all Americans, while simultaneously appealing to the rhetoric of individual control that his audience longed for. Given vaudeville's place in the emerging big business culture that threatened this moral code, this balance helps Hubbard to override any reservations the middle class might have about patronizing the industry. This kind of gives me confirmation that everyone thinks that theater is a fun little art form that is super fun and super easy and not hard at all, and not, consisting of a lot of hard labor and a lot of hours and time spent to make something, aka this is an arts and crafts thing. This is a fun thing for us artists to do for you, for the community. The artists are the marionettes, while the producers, managers, everyone else making the money are just living their dreams. They're living their monopolizing dreams. My 2 cents, everyone should be treated and paid enough so they don't need to worry about the next rent check bouncing. Theater is way too big of a commodity and way too big of a business to treat as a leisurely thing. It is a product. It is a business. I want to eat. Man, when it came to the decline of interest in vaudeville, there were a few things, but mainly it was due to the stock market crash in 1929. Theaters basically turned into movie theaters or to burlesque theaters, which is basically the storyline of Louise Havoc, who turned into Gypsy Rose Lee, who we see in the musical Gypsy, which is one of my favorites. And then with the crash leading into the Depression, a lot of vaudeville performers actually moved to LA to see if they could get a break over there, and they actually did. A lot of them them did. And the movie industry was smart about it. Like, they knew that vaudeville stars was going to buy tickets, and the fact that they were able to enhance their technology with sound, like they were able to do full-fledged musicals by the early 1930s. Anyone that you see in a musical movie probably got their start in vaudeville. The best example I can give is the youngest of the Gum sisters turned into who we know as Judy Garland, and her main counterparts in The Wizard of Oz were also originally from vaudeville: Ray Bolger, Bert Lahr, and Jack Haley. Fun fact, originally Jack Haley was not the original Tin Man, but due to almost killing the first Tin Man, he got the job. Another great Casro video. Go check her out. I'm just a fan. Money and the monopolizing of entertainment is the tie between these two forms of theater. Within the musical theater industry today, you can easily see this being used specifically when it comes to trying to figure out what sort of commercial theater can work with the masses. And that's honestly why I think jukebox musicals are such a huge thing, because you can work any sort of play structure around them, like a classic story retelling such as Anne Juliet, or if you do like the backstory of an artist like Beautiful Noise or Jersey Boys. Is it a cheap and gross way to make millions on Broadway? Yes. Does it also give dozens and dozens of new job opportunities for artists in the theater district? Yeah. It's a bit of a catch-22 when it comes to unique pieces of art in commercial theater, when at the end of the day, it's money that matters. I mean, that's why we see in regional theaters doing all of these jukebox X musicals, especially with Beautiful just coming out with their licensing. Waitress, for example, is becoming a big one to do in regional theaters. Back in 2018, everyone and their mother was auditioning for Mamma Mia at every single regional theater. Theater is now seen as a heightened commodity and therefore expensive, and if regional theaters, especially when they're in the red, which most of them kind of are, and then they need to make sure that they can get their money back. A surefire way of doing that is putting on a jukebox musical for a 2-month stint. If you want to make easy money, do that. And also just seeing the lack of interest in musical theater at the moment is kind of similar to the demise of vaudeville. I mean, instead of the Depression, we had COVID. Musical theater had its freaking peak with Hamilton. Like, at the moment in history, it's like things that happened before Hamilton and things that happened after Hamilton. And I'll be honest, things that has happened after Hamilton hasn't really been like mind-boggling to me since. There are very good exceptions to that, but I just feel like it's bleh. And maybe I'm just cynical. Since COVID, we have been trying so hard to bring this form of entertainment back to life, especially in New York. Nowadays, people are kind of a bit more precious on what they do with their time and also how they spend their money. Theater is freaking expensive, y'all. I'm sorry, but if a patron in the Midwest had the option of buying a ticket in the last row of the Richard Rodgers Theater to see Hamilton for $700, or to just buy the Disney Plus subscription if they don't have it and watch the live performance of Hamilton for $7, I mean, just go with the Disney Plus, y'all. And to be honest, seeing the original cast do it is like freaking, it slaps. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, of vaudeville and its link to musical theater history. Yeah, I might be cynical, but I also think that the funding for the arts here is very laughable compared to how supportive European governments are and the amount that they're able to aid towards funding in the theater arts. I personally think that commercial theater should be funded by the government. If they want to go that crazy, like, just do that so that you can also pay your people a fair wage so they don't have to worry about having enough to get a subway ride home. The minimum weekly standard for a Broadway performer is decent, but depending on their current economic situation, especially with rent and student loan debt. So my 2 cents, I think theater needs more funding, and if we can get it from the government, even better. Just see how it goes. See what that is like. See if it like changes things, and if it doesn't work, then we'll find something else to do. And also, it's at the point where it's so expensive that only people with a 6-figure salary are able to go and see the theater maybe once every 6 months. My grandparents going to see a show a week for 4-6 years straight, I could never. I literally couldn't. I would be on the streets. No, I wouldn't be on the streets. I'd just be back home in Vermont. It's literally impossible. Impossible. For a plain yellow pumpkin. I really hope this turns into something of a presentation. I hope you liked it. I hope you found this somewhat interesting. I found it very interesting to look up and research. If you liked this, give it a like, and let me know in the comments what you think about this. And if there's like anything that I missed, please leave it in the comments. Musical theater history is such a vast topic that I can only talk about so much, and my brain really hurts right now, and I'm gonna stop talking. But I also just want to quickly say thank you for the 500 subscribers. That is really exciting. I actually reached my goal despite not reaching my goal in terms of how much content I've been producing. But thank you for everyone who has been here so far. If you would like to join the family, please subscribe. May you be happy, healthy, safe, and at ease, and free from harm. And I will see you in the next one. Wow, my brain hurts. Oh my gosh.